crap! I'm not where I need to be. Shit! I need to catch that Max. This is a fun beginning. Oh yes, I got a walk signal. Okay. I don't have a walk signal here though. I'm going for it. I think I'm gonna make it. Oh shit. I just get my pass. That's how it would be when you a Portlander. You have to take public transportation all the time and you hate just barely missing something and having to wait 15 minutes for the next one. You make sure you catch that public transportation no matter what it was. Anyway, I'm over by OMSI, Oregon Museum of Science and Industry, which is right over here. It's actually an old train museum over here that I've wanted to visit, but they have very tight hours. I think they're open 1 to 5 Thursday through Friday and noon to 5 on weekends. It's just a very tight schedule. It doesn't work very well for me. But anyway, I'm here today with a fresh episode of Historic Murders of Portland. And the reason I'm down here by OMSI and all this train paraphernalia is this general area. There used to be this was like a big electrical facility, like PGE, Portland General Electric. Over where OMSI is, that was all a big, electric station. But right next door was the Inman-Poulsen Lumber Company. And they actually they were kind of buddy-buddied together, those two businesses. I think even to help keep things, I don't know what the term is, but to help keep some electrical things going, they would bum extra wood chips and stuff from Inman-Poulsen to use. And then I think the trade-off was they gave Inman-Poulsen a deal on electricity or something. I don't know exactly how that worked, but anyway, that lumber company was right next to that big electrical apparatus that now has OMSI in its place. And there's elements of that old time here. There's a couple old buildings, and I did a video a while back showing what was left of those buildings, but I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about murder. Now I can't tell you the complete and total layout of the lumber company. I just know that I'm pretty much standing in its vicinity. I would kind of be walking through it because electrical company would have been right there. You can kind of see downtown through the Markham Bridge off-ramp. But I know the address to, it was actually in one of the articles I read, the address that was generally used for the Inman-Poulsen Lumber Company was Division and Grand, which, if you look through here, you can see there's a overpass way over there. That is, it's McLaughlin kind of branching off and becoming MLK and Grand Avenue, and Division is going underneath it. So right about where that off-ramp is would generally considered the address that was used by Inman-Poulsen. So there's kind of where they say generally it entered, but obviously it's a lumber company, so it's huge, it takes up a lot of space, and it was next to the electric group apparatus, whatever, that was over here. So I'm generally kind of standing where the lumber company is. It may have been kind of more towards this side of the rails, but it'd be a nightmare for me to try to get all the way over there. Literally, I think I would have to actually get up to Grand and then come down. So I'm in the vicinity of where Inman-Poulsen Lumber Company was. It was a very prominent company in this town. And for our sake, because we're not here to kiss the ass of lumber companies, it was February 28th, 1931. So we're actually in the early throes of the Great Depression. And there was a guy named Albert Gilbert, who had worked here at Inman-Poulsen for some 15 years. So he was a long-termer. And a few days before the 28th, around the 23rd, 24th of February, Gilbert got laid off after 15 years, which is enough to piss off just about anybody. And apparently it wasn't like a complete and total termination. It was more like the economy's crap, the depression is upon us. We're about a year and a half since the stock market crashed. And it was kind of like, I have too many men. This is what the brass was thinking. I have too many men here. I gotta let some of you go. Still a jerk move to let go the guy that's been there 15 years. I'm willing to bet a lot of the guys that worked here hadn't been here that long. So needless to say, Albert Gilbert was a little pissed off about this. But people who knew him said he didn't really talk about it that much. He didn't talk about it like he was obsessed and vengeful about it. But he didn't have the greatest relationship with the superintendent of this establishment here, a guy named John Bevis, who was an older gentleman. I actually think he was in his early 70s, and he was the superintendent. And according to Gilbert actually referred to him, I think he referred to him as a tyrant, and he said he just did not like this guy at all. He was condescending. He treated him like a lesser employee, even though he worked hard. Granted, these are Gilbert's words, so they may be subject to exaggeration. And he claimed that Bevis would constantly, lower his pay wage while giving other employees who didn't work that hard more pay. It seems like there was a lot of, give more pay to the people you like and less to the people you don't like. And again, this guy's been there for years. I wouldn't tolerate that at a workplace, but I would probably move on to somewhere else that actually paid me a fair wage. But that wasn't really in the cards for Albert Gilbert. I'm never going to get bored of saying that name, Albert Gilbert. So, February 28th, 1931, it's just another working day here at Inman-Poulsen. People are going about their business. Albert Gilbert shows up, and he goes straight to the office of John Bevis, the guy who let him go. And by his personal account, he goes back in and does what a lot of people do. It's been a couple days. He says, come on, man, give me my job back. I've been here 15 years. I deserve better treatment than this. Apparently, John Bevis doesn't give a crap, doesn't want to hear his sob story. It's a depression. You guys will bounce back. How many times have we heard that? And, not that I ever condone murder. When it happens on TV, no one's actually getting killed. But when it happens in the real world, that's a whole other story. That's a life being taken from this world. And our lives are everything. That's all we have. But that being said, the next series of events that happen after Gilbert goes into Bevis's office and tries to get his job back, and Bevis is like, no, get out of here, go to hell, I don't care about you, be gone. This is something straight out of a Hollywood film, maybe a corny Hollywood film, but after being denied his job back, Gilbert hands Bevis a note, apparently a note that he'd written. And there was a little bit more to it, but the main focus of it, the first part of the note, and this is word for word as it was reported in the newspaper, the note that Gilbert gave to Bevis started off by saying, Sometimes, due to terrible conditions and unfairness of the dominative class, it is time for proof that some drastic measure must be used so as to effect enough change to permit all working people a chance for a living. Essentially, you're the bourgeois, we're the proletariat, and what's going on in the world, there's still rich people reaping the rewards of all these people that are starving to death and dying on the streets with the onset of the Depression. And sometimes it's going to take drastic action to incite change. Bevis reads those words, lowers the note, looks up at Gilbert standing in front of him. Gilbert pulls a revolver, boom, boom, pumps 2 bullets into John Bevis and kills him right in his own office. Again, I don't condone murder in any way, shape, or form. I don't consider Albert Gilbert a badass, but I mean, if you're gonna go out, that is the Hollywood way to go out. Hand him a note that says, you know what, you're a piece of shit, and I'm going to have to do something about it, and he just shoots the guy dead in his office. Sorry, I shouldn't laugh. It's just such a crazy story. And there was another guy, the president of the company, a man named Thatcher. He was the president of the Inman-Poulsen company here. It was made abundantly clear that he was the main, or probably the next target. Bevis was the first target because he was the guy that directly wronged Albert Gilbert. But Albert Gilbert apparently had beef with the whole company, the whole system. I think he had an issue with the whole kind of capitalist system in general. In fact, in the aftermath, it was pushed very hard that one of the driving factors behind Gilbert doing what he did was that he was a communist sympathizer. Apparently there had been some wild communist speeches being made in the Portland area, and they claimed that he attended a bunch of these and was affected by them, and that's what drove him to friggin' murder his superintendent in cold blood. And maybe he had some communist leanings, but he denied in the aftermath that he was a communist. But it seemed, but again, God forbid someone criticize the system. God forbid someone say, maybe these filthy rich people shouldn't be as rich as they are when people are dying on the streets and starving to death. That's always been, it's happening right now. I don't want to get political, but, people who want universal health care and for student loan debt to be forgiven and things like that, things that are weighing people down and destroying lives, when people say they want that stuff gotten rid of, they're called commies and socialists. Hell, I'm one of them. Not one of the people that calls people commies and socialists, but I'm one of those people that believes those things need to happen for the betterment of our country. All right, that rant done. But you see, it's kind of an ongoing thing. Here's a case from almost 90 years ago, and there's still kind of this same sentiment. I'm not saying Albert Gilbert was right to shoot anybody, but they act like he was crazy because he saw society a little bit different than the kind of mainstream person. And because this was a lumber company and there was so much noise going on, people didn't hear the shooting because it was drowned out by all the lumber mill noise. And Albert Gilbert walked out and walked up to John Bevis's son, Roy. Again, nobody realizes the shooting's taking place, and he essentially said, hey, your dad's in the office, you should go in there and take a look at him. Of course, Roy goes in and sees that his father's been shot to death, and apparently Albert Gilbert screams out for this Thatcher guy, like, Thatcher, I'm coming for you. And fortunately, there was a lot of employees there, and the assistant superintendent actually leaped forward, and even with gun in hand, he tackled Gilbert. And in the process of their scuffle, he was shot in the abdomen, almost died himself. But because he lurched out at Albert Gilbert, prevented him from getting to the president of the company, and in slowing him, all these other employees, there was like 50 employees or something, they all just swarmed in and overtook him. Police are called, Albert Gilbert's arrested. He takes the life of John Bevis and almost takes the life of another employee there. And he's whisked away. And again, he's kind of explained away just as kind of a commie sympathizer. And if you're a commie, well, then you're a loony. So they do things like this. So Albert Gilbert goes on trial for his actions. And, I mean, something that's to his benefit. Of course, I can't say who's right and who's wrong, but something that was to his benefit was, again, nobody even realized a shooting had taken place. Nobody witnessed the shooting and the events in there. So, you know, Albert Gilbert was in a position to change certain details of what happened. So while, you know, there's this initial story that seems vindicated that he went in and shot John Bevis, you know, in cold blood, while on trial, he claimed that, you know, while they were discussing this, John Bevis just went ballistic and lurched at him and tried to fight with him, and in the fight the gun went off, and, you know, Albert Gilbert was like, I don't know how the gun went off, but it just went off. It was a very standard thing in cases. They attacked me first, I only brought the gun for defense, and when we scuffled, just somehow the trigger moved and things happened, and I don't know how they happened. Very standard way. I don't believe it for a second. I think Albert Gilbert knew he was alone with John Bevis and that there was no witness to impeach him, and he just tried to make it look as good as possible for himself. He didn't help himself by going on the stage and calling, you know, the superintendent a tyrant. And, you know, I mean, the prosecution did what the prosecution was going to do. They weighed heavily on this guy's just a crazed commie angle, which would probably be enough to convince any jury. However, you know, he goes up on first-degree murder. If he's convicted, he's doing life in prison. And the only he's going to the death penalty. And the only reason he wasn't convicted and didn't go, you know, to wait in a cell to be executed. And they didn't wait to execute you like you do now. You have maybe a month or two before they're going to execute you after your conviction. But in the 12-person jury for his case, because, you know, they tried to claim he was insane, as, you know, they do in any case, and maybe this guy was a little insane, I don't know. But there was one woman on his jury. Nobody else bought the insanity defense, but there was one woman who was so convinced that he really was insane that she held out for 53 and a half hours, is what the newspaper said. They were together for 53 and a half hours before everyone was like, all right, we're not going to resolve this thing. It's just not going to happen. And so they ended up having a hung jury. And so a little while on down the road, you know, Albert Gilbert probably did the best that, you know, he made the best decision he could. He escaped the death penalty by the skin of his teeth thanks to one woman. So before the next trial was set, he reached a plea agreement and was able to plead down to second-degree murder, which meant no death penalty but life in prison. It's not exactly a great ending, you know, or a great, you know, remains to one's life, but to him, it's better than being executed in a couple of weeks. And whenever you get a life sentence, you can always appeal it. You never know when something's going to go your way. You never know when eventually, wet spot, you know, things are going to shift and maybe they find you insane in a future trial. But as far as I know, that's really where it ended for Albert Gilbert. He escaped a hanging, the chair, whatever they were going to use, and he managed to plead down to just life in prison and save his life, so to speak. And that's the crazy story of what happened at the Inman-Poulsen lumber company back over here back in 1931. Crazy story, no joke. So as always, gang, remember to like, share, subscribe, hit up my Patreon if you so choose. And all that said, till next time, it's been Steve the Amateur Historian, and I'll catch you guys next time.